Hi, it's Florian, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to build wealth. I'm making this video because I have the feeling that a lot of people don't understand what wealth actually is, how you show wealth and how you become wealthy. So if you want to know how you can maybe benefit from whatever education you have, whatever income you have, stay tuned and I will explain. So what are the things that you need to understand if it comes to building some wealth? One thing is to understand cash flows. So a cash flow is actually something that can be either positive or negative. So either cash can flow into your pocket or out of your pocket. Everything you have that generates a positive cash flow, so that generates cash for you, is called an asset. And everything that takes cash out of your pocket is called a liability. And you need to be very clear and you need to understand this concept very deeply to understand how to become wealthy, because what you want to have is you want to have a lot of assets and you want to have as least liabilities as possible. So these two concepts are very important to understand. Another concept that is important to understand is that of debt and of equities. So if you have debt, then it usually generates a negative cash flow, but an exponential one because of the interest rates. So your cash exponentially becomes lower. If you have an equity, so of something that generates cash and that grows with a specific percentage, it will get exponentially higher. So the moment you have to pay down debt, the moment you need to work against an exponential function, and the moment you have something that generates cash and generates interest rates, an exponential function works for you. So these two things are very important to understand, because with this concept in mind, you can evaluate most things that you do. And when it comes to assets and to cash generation, the asset that most people have are only themselves. So it's your work that has the biggest cash flow for you. Usually people don't have companies, they don't have huge, they don't inherit a lot of money. They don't have a huge stock portfolio or bonds or whatever that generate money. The only thing that generates money for most people are themselves. So you are your biggest asset. And that is important to understand. Because if you get now an education or if you get trained in something, what you do actually is you increase your asset value. So you increase the amount of money that you can make if you change your job or if you can get a better job with a better education. Then usually it's paid higher and your asset value is increased. But at the same time, it's also important to understand what liabilities you have. So basically everything else that you have is a liability. Your smartphone is one, your car is one, your house is one, your television is one, your laptop is one. All of that doesn't generate cash and loses cash over time. Or it costs you rent or lease or whatever. And that are all things that cost you cash. So these concepts are very important to understand when it comes to building wealth, which means building an asset portfolio that generates cash without you working for it. And that is something that is very hard to do, especially if you are in debt. That is the next thing you need to understand. Debt is always bad because of the negative interest rate and of the exponential function. So when you want to become wealthy, you need to avoid debt. So you need to avoid spending more than you have for consumer goods. So for things that don't generate a positive cash flow, which is basically everything. So don't go in debt early, and don't go in debt if you don't have to. So don't buy a car or lease a car on with the credit that you take on, or a television or whatever. I know it's very easy to get consumer debt, but you should never do that because it works against you with an exponential function. And you work against an exponential function and at the same time try to build assets. That's not possible. So you need to control your debt. Spend less than you can spend, not more than you can spend. Whenever you take a consumer credit, you spend more than you can spend. Be aware of that. Spend less, because what you spend less, you can invest. So don't go into debt. And sometimes you have to. For example, if you have a student loan, usually if you study, especially in the United States or in the United Kingdom, you have to pay to study. You have to pay tuitions. And if you can't afford these tuitions, you go into debt. And that is very bad because you have a big debt at the start of your work life that works against you. the whole time until you paid it back. And that is a horrible thing. And you should be aware of that. And you should control it when you start studying. So you should try to come out of your studies with as least debt as possible. There are a lot of possibilities, maybe some you don't think of. So you could, for example, also go to another country that doesn't have tuition fees. I, for example, live in Germany. I was debt-free after my studies and also after my PhD. I even got paid for my PhD because in Germany we don't have tuition fees. So you just pay for your normal living, and that you can do with a side job, or you even have state or government subsidies where you can pay. So you don't get into debt. And that's very important. The earlier you get out of debt in your life, the better it is. And that is true for a lot of things, especially, and that is something that most people get wrong, especially for mortgages. So once you've studied and you worked a bit and you maybe want to have a family and you want to have a house, you can choose to rent a house or to buy a house or an apartment, whatever. And this is a very important decision, because the moment you buy a house, you usually don't have the money, you need to take a mortgage. And this mortgage is a huge amount of debt, where you have an equity that stands against it, which is then your house. And this equity, if it falls in value, you have a high leverage on an equity that falls in value, which is very, very bad. So you need to be aware, if you buy something, first of all, you need to stay some time, and it shouldn't lose value. So I, for example, bought the house that I'm living in 9 years ago, and I was lucky because the value more than doubled. So you could say, yeah, now I'm lucky, I have a house that is worth double than I paid for it, and I of course could sell it, but in reality I can't, because I need to live somewhere. So the house you live in is something that is always a liability. It doesn't matter if you own it or not, because it always costs you money. You always have to pay for repairs, for gas, water, electricity, taxes, whatever. The house you live in is never an asset. The house you buy to rent to someone else or to lease to someone else, that's an asset. But the house you live in is never an asset. And it doesn't matter how the value rises. It matters if it falls, but if it rises, it doesn't help you. Because the only thing you could do is take more debt on the house, which is something you don't want to do. You want to pay down the debt as quick as possible. And that is something I can only advise to do. Pay down a mortgage as quickly as you can, because that works against you the whole time that you have it, and that works against you with a huge amount of money. So don't, if you have debt and if you take it for buying a house or having a student loan, pay it down as quickly as you can and reduce your living standard to do so. So don't take another debt on, the consumer debts or whatever. Just stay out of debt. That is the advice that I can give you. The moment you are out of debt, you can increase your assets, or if you have lower debt than income. So if you have enough income at some time point where you say, oh, I grew in my job, I got promoted a few times, and I bought a house, I don't know, 10 years ago, and now I earn more money, then suddenly you have money that you could spend either for consuming more things or for buying assets that then pay you money. And that is very important to understand. So don't get into debt. And the next thing that you need to know is, how do I buy assets now? So let's say now you have some money left. You reduced your consumer spending. You reduced your debt, so you don't pay too much interest and too much money on your debt. Now you have something left. What do you do with it? So how do you now turn that money into an asset? And there are a lot of things you can do. You can buy stocks, you can buy bonds, you can buy houses, you can buy, I don't know, goods like oil or coal or whatever, or wheat, or I don't know. So you can buy a lot of things and hold it and then see if the price rises, or you buy something that generates a cash flow, like a dividend or an interest rate, where you just get money from it. And that is something you can do, but there's a lot of things that you could do. So how now, let's say you can spend $1,000 a month that you invest in something. How do you know where to invest it to? How do you know that? And that is there, and you should the moment you have this kind of money, or even if you just have $100 a month and you can invest it somewhere, that's possible. You should start early. You should start to invest as early as you can, and you should choose an investment that you think is worth investing in. So you should educate yourself, first of all. You should educate on the types of investments. You should educate on what is an investment and what is a speculation, which is something completely different. You should educate yourself on risk profiles, on types of assets. You should listen to people who already made a lot of money, and they have all different opinions because they made a lot of money on different asset classes and maybe on with different strategies. But all of them worked out in the end, and they were bound to the people, to the time they were in, maybe a bit on luck or whatever they had. And you for yourself need to educate yourself what kind of asset class there are, how you can invest in them, and you should build a strategy for your own. So you should be able to explain to yourself, to your friends, to your family, to your kids, to your wife, to your husband, to whoever, why am I investing in this asset? Why do I think that this asset will be worth more in 5 years from now than it is worth now? Why do I think that this is a good idea to invest in this? And the moment you can explain that, and the moment you have a story for that, you usually cannot lose money, because if you do that not only for one asset but for a lot of them, so diversify yourself. And that's also something that diversity is something that is also by definition not defined. You can diversify yourself with just 2 assets or with 100 assets, it doesn't matter. But if you diversify yourself and for every of these assets you have an explanation why it should grow, it will grow. So start investing early and don't go into debt. And what is the last thing that I need to really be clear is that financial freedom comes with sacrifices, but it's worth it. So sacrifice your consumer spending. No one needs a lot of consumer spending. It's just your brain or the society around you tricking you into buying new laptops, new clothes, new cars, new bigger houses, whatever. And that generates a huge negative cash flow. So if you want to show off, if you want to show you are wealthy, that you have money, if you get a better job and earn more and you spend it directly to buy a new phone and a new laptop and a new car, then you actually generate a huge negative cash flow. So you don't have anything left from your promotion. The moment you lose your job, the moment you retire, the moment something goes wrong, all of that is worthless. So do not spend what you can spend, and never spend more than you can spend. Never go into consumer debt. That is very, very important to understand, because being wealthy and looking wealthy are 2 different things. Many people look wealthy, but they are not. And many people spend a lot of money to just look wealthy. But it's totally unimportant, because the moment you are wealthy, the moment you look at your bank account and see 6-figure numbers or whatever, or 7-figure numbers, and maybe have a house that belongs to you, even if you just wear old clothes and have a shitty car somewhere in the garage, you will be very happy, because you can say, yeah, now I really have the freedom. If you want to go on vacation, you go. If you want to buy a car, you buy one. If you want to buy a phone, you buy one. It doesn't matter to you. But you don't do that because you're so happy that you have these bank accounts actually, or the money that you have. So and you only go to this I would say state if you saved a lot in your early days. So then if you are an entrepreneur and found a company, then it goes faster. But if you are just working somewhere and you do that over the time, you will get a huge wealth, because the exponential function for assets works for you. And if you do that for 20 years, for example, if you just buy the S&P 500, which is a stock market, that had an average return of 8% over the last 100 years. So if you buy that and hold it for 20 years, you will have your money out 4.6 times. So if you invest 1,000 euros or dollars now, wait 20 years, in average you will get 4,600 out of it. So, and that is an exponential function working for you. And after 30 years, it will be even much more. So what you should do, and what you should always do, is think about how much you need to spend, how much you want to spend, and how much you have to spend, and then reduce it. So don't spend too much. Spend in assets. That will give you a much better feeling than always worrying about how to pay your mortgage, how to pay down your debt, and all of that, but having a new phone. That doesn't give you a lot of happiness. So if you have any questions, post them in the comments. If you liked what I told, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down, and subscribe to my channel. Whatever you do, have a good day. Goodbye.